Dr. Kelli here. I have a background in clinical mental health counseling. I am a nutritional therapist and also a quantum health strategy educator and clinician. So I take a pretty broad kind of holistic approach when I am working with individuals. And recently, I have been doing more and more work specifically around anxiety relief. So I'm going to be putting more videos up because I feel like I'm learning more. I mean, I've been in the business for, oh gosh, since 93. 1993 is when I first started in psychology and working in the field of psychology, and then went on to clinical mental health counseling. So I feel like I'm returning to my roots of really digging into care of the soul, but also mental health. So I like to work with people in terms of nutrition and the quantum strategies, because I feel like that's what's missing in the clinical mental health counseling world. Amazing people in mental health or mental health professionals, but most people don't understand the quantum health strategies because it's just so new. The science in quantum biology is emerging, so it can be very helpful to understand the nutrition piece and the quantum health piece. But today I want to be talking to you all about something that I call fear fatigue, something I know way too much about personally. So I'm going to be talking about it, from my professional experience, but also my personal experience with chronic anxiety and that kind of fatigue, overwhelm, exhaustion. The body's so worn out from just having that chronic anxiety and worry. So I'm going to be talking about that. If you're new here, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. If you have not already, I would love it if you would subscribe to the channel. That is very helpful. So I appreciate that. So let's get to it. A couple of things have happened recently to me. I have been talking a lot about emotions and the fact that you can work with your thoughts and you can start with behaviors and kind of work your way back. But I don't think there is anything as powerful as really digging into the emotions. Where I am now compared to when I first started, I didn't really want to talk about emotions at all, actually, because I didn't want to deal with my own. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to be the therapist that works with people's thoughts and behaviors. What do you think? What do you want to do? And not really that whole, like, how are you feeling? I just didn't want to do that. And at some point in my career, oh gosh, over 10 years ago, I started learning more about shame and shame resilience and digging into the research there. Ended up working with Brene Brown's curriculum. I was a consultant for that company. Loved it. Learned a lot from Brene, right? As many of you might have already found her work. And what I learned is that we are feeling beings that think and behave. We really, and it's just taken me a long time to really get that in my bones, in my life, in my daily life, of really digging into the emotions, much more so than I would have before that, prior to 10 years ago. But it's been a process, right? So this is not overnight kinds of things. So a couple of things have happened recently that I wanted to talk about, kind of what happened. And what I realized is that you can think something, like you can intellectually know something. You know how you know it, but you're not really living your life as if you did know it. And one of the things that happened recently, we had a tragedy in our community. A beautiful 16-year-old boy tragically died, and way too young. And so, of course, we were all heartbroken. We've all been coming together as a community, and a couple of things have happened for me. One of them happened at his remembrance ceremony, and it's something that I've always known, and yet it didn't layer in really until I was sitting in the remembrance ceremony. And like my whole body, my cells, everything just realized that all the worry and all of the anxiety does not keep bad things from happening. Already knew that. I already know that we have a choice, even when it feels like we don't have any choice. Any time in our life, all the situations that we're in, we have a choice of how we're going to respond. We can't always change the stressful situations. We can't, what I have learned in my own, particularly in the last 14 months with my own son, my youngest son, I can't breathe for him. I can't do his healing for him. All I can do is my own healing and be supportive. What I would not change over the last 14 months, I will say, what I would change is the chronic worry, the chronic anxiety. And I know better. I was using a lot of strategies to work with that. And so I'll tell you what happened or how I came to it. But what I didn't, what I would keep, what I've been doing the whole time is creating as much safety as possible. I've sort of gone through this. Most of the time I'm anxious and worried about him and just love him so much, want so much to help him. And yet also I'm mad at him a lot of times because he won't do the things that I think would really be helpful to him. But he is adorable and he's a wonderful human being. And I couldn't stop myself from this chronic anxiety. It was almost like I was, holding my breath, trying to help him. And I know better. But what happened in that ceremony, that remembrance ceremony, I just layered in like that has not, life is going to happen. Good stuff, bad stuff, neutral stuff is going to happen, whether you're worried about it or not. And it was almost like if I stayed worried and anxious about it, that was somehow going to protect or create some good outcome. And we know, of course, we all know that does not happen. So that happened. It just layered in a way. I was like, I have a choice of how I want to spend my life. And what it has done in the last 14 months, well, it actually helped me learn the quantum health strategies, which is great. And I think that's what's been keeping me not just propped up to move. I've actually felt really energized. I've had a lot of deep healing, which is fantastic. And I have also really struggled to keep the anxiety at bay, right? The chronic anxiety. So while I was sitting there, I was like, I have a choice of how I want to live my life. And for a solid day, I felt totally different. And then the next day I had, this is the way it works. The next day he had a bad day. And I was like, when he has a bad day, I tend to have not a great day. But what I do is amp up my own support, my own healing. And that has been really helpful. So the reason I harp on the quantum health strategies, because I'm telling you, they are the way of the future. They are the way of healing. And amazing, because I continue to wake up energized and ready for the day, even when it's all like hitting the fan. So the things that I think are really important, where I would start with quantum strategies, if I had to do it all over again, I would start with light and circadian rhythms. I have lots of videos. I'm going to be putting out more videos on that. So I would start with the light and the circadian rhythms, because I think that's the thing that's missing. Most people don't understand that. Then nutrition. So, and this is not step functions. These are all of the things I think need to be included in a pro-healing plan. So if you've got some healing to do, and it's particular around mental health and anxiety, then this is the plan that I would put together with you. This is what I do with clients. This is what I've done with myself. And it really, light and circadian rhythms have to be at the top. Then I would say nutrition, creating a pro-healing approach to the way that you're eating. Most people do not realize how much their mood is related to their food. And so that makes a big difference for people. And often people can kind of stop right there and have a lot of healing. I would say you cannot thrive without it supporting your nervous system. And there are a lot of ways to do that. There are a lot of ways for supporting your nervous system. And the relaxation response, so understanding how to elicit the relaxation response, I think is a good place to start. I have a video on that if you want to learn more about that. But there are lots of ways to support your nervous system. Then I would say also movement. So not necessarily hardcore exercise, but moving the body. We are made to move. And then nature is a really important piece too. So earthing, I've got videos on earthing too. And somebody argued with me here on YouTube, just pointing out that someone has debunked some of the information about absorbing electrons. Well, first of all, that's not the main benefit of earthing. So we're really after those safety signals for the body. So it's also supporting your nervous system. It's helping your entire being, every cell in your body. So that's not the primary benefit anyway, but I have done a lot of digging and I still stand by that. I still think that earthing is really helpful, and we are absorbing those electrons through our bare skin from the Earth's surface. So, and what I would say is just try it and see if it helps you. Consistently doing that. But being in nature itself is a safety signal, and we've all sort of forgotten that. And light, no organism on this planet can thrive without natural light exposure. So working with the light, getting the light right, I think is primary. So those are all the things that I would say are really important in a pro-healing plan. And as, particularly if you're dealing with that fear fatigue, where you are fatigued for whatever reason, but the fatigue from the anxiety, I promise you, supporting your circadian rhythms, getting the light right, working with your nutrition, the movement, supporting your nervous system and nature, all of those things are going to be really important in your overall healing. What layered in for me over the last couple of weeks, as we have been living through this tragedy in our community, and what came, of course, a lot of grief came up for me. And what I realized is that I have a lot of grief that I've been shoving down for 14 months, probably a lot longer, because, longer than that, but for sure. And one of the things that happened in February of this year, I realized in February of 2023 that I was just as chronically anxious as I was in February of 22. And although I have all of these strategies in place where I wake up feeling energized, my sleep is really good, I use red light therapy, I use cold therapy, I use all of the things, I was still carrying around a lot of chronic worry. And I thought, this is not sustainable. I've been saying that for a while. This is not sustainable. Like and I'm telling you, I have a God jar. I have shoved all kinds of little pieces of paper in that God jar to kind of surrender it. I've done spiritual work. I've done energy work, all on this. All kinds of things. And what I found the most helpful just happened in relationship to all of this grief is I realized you cannot shove down emotions. And the truth is, I didn't even realize that I had that. I didn't think my thoughts weren't even around grief. My behaviors weren't even around grief. So I wasn't even aware that I was holding on to that. Kind of what I learned when I was doing a lot of the shame work too, is that often we call shame things, other things. We don't call it what it is. We don't even really recognize it. We shove all that down, and we're walking around these emotional beings. We are feeling beings walking around, and that's actually creating, even vibrationally, right? That is creating an experience for us. So being curious about the emotions is really important. And even those of us who know that, do that, trying to do that, sometimes it can kind of catch you off guard, and it can catch you and be like, oh, I didn't even realize I was carrying around this much, whatever the feeling is. Now, all of those are fear-based, right? Anxiety, worry, all of the fear-based kinds of things, grief. And so I just call that fear fatigue. Like any of that stuff that you're carrying around that just fatigues the body. It's going to fatigue your limbic system. It's going to fatigue your nervous system, but it's also just fatiguing in general. So things that we can do to support that, but also you got to acknowledge, I don't want to say you got to acknowledge it, because if you don't even know it's there, I would say stay curious and understand that the emotions they're running the show. So if we don't stay curious about that, and when they do come up, feel them. That's the thing. We're not actually getting rid of anxiety forever. We're not getting rid of all of these things that we don't want to feel. It's actually that we move through them in a different way, in a healthier, actually even sometimes faster way. Not that faster is necessarily the goal, but I think what happens is a lot of us feel like it's going to swallow us. If I start feeling this, it'll be like an avalanche and I won't be able to handle it. I've never, in all of my years of working with people and working with students and working with in the field, I have never seen that actually happen. The feeling of the feelings and the bringing all that to consciousness is actually very helpful and necessary, it seems. So that is kind of what has been going on for me, is like, I tell people that emotions are important and you got to stay curious there. And I want to acknowledge that sometimes that's tricky business, especially when you spent most of your life shoving things down, moving on, put on your big girl panties, put on your big boy panties and move on, that kind of attitude, which sometimes we have to survive. And I appreciate that too, but there can get to a season where that's no longer helpful. And so in order to really move to a different place, we actually have to feel the feelings and let that in a bit and move through it. You also, part of moving through it is acknowledging it, being aware, staying curious about our emotions, getting kind of dissecting it just a little bit. I don't get into the whole like, oh, you're psychoanalyzing me. I'm not a psychoanalyst. My roots are in Adlerian. So I stay curious though about those emotions. And that's what I tell other people to do, is stay curious about that and then call it what it is and contextualize it a bit. So you kind of get a little bit more of an understanding, reach out to tell another human being if possible. You can journal, you can do all kinds of things, but generally when we're met with empathy, that really tampers down those feelings. Or it's not even like it's tampering down, it helps us move through it, is probably a better way of saying that. But when we're met with empathy, so you've got to tell another human being that's capable of empathy. And sometimes we have to teach the people in our lives what feels like empathy to us, because they don't know. Because what feels like empathy to them maybe isn't what feels like empathy to us. So doing some of that. And then, so you're reaching out, you're telling your story to the person who has earned the right to hear it and has the capacity to have empathy. But then also, what do you need? And I think that's what I got really curious about in this last week, of what is it that I want? And what, in these moments, where is the choice? How can I choose? Because sometimes pivoting out of a really negative space is difficult. And the Dalai Lama, when someone asked him about negative thoughts, first of all, he immediately said, negative emotions. And I don't think he purposely was just dismissing thoughts. I know he heard it. And he went immediately to negative emotions. And he said they come from two things, which I think this is kind of interesting. Self-focus. So being me, I, my, all focused on ourselves, but also that we believe that our perception is reality. And if there's anything that I've learned in my own spiritual journey, in my own healing journey, is that rarely is anything as it seems. And so if we are co-creating this dream or this life that we're in, In every moment, we have a choice in that co-creation, and that is an important piece of it. We can pivot out of a negative space, out of negative emotions, by one, taking the focus off of ourself. So anytime you can do something nice for somebody else, and it'll help pivot out of there. But also just to remind yourself that what you are sensing, what you're seeing, what you're hearing, what you're experiencing, that we think is reality, that it is nothing is as it seems, or rarely is anything as it seems. And what I've also learned is only love is real. And love is not that gushy kind of always feels good, that kind of what we think of as romantic love. I'm talking about like real quantum, no words in the English language to describe this quantum vibration of love. And that is real. And sometimes that is actually brutal and harsh, but that is real. The rest of it, best I can tell, is an illusion. So when we're stuck in this chronic anxiety loop, I know it's getting yourself unstuck is not easily done. I'm pretty sure that's a Dr. Seuss book that says that. Getting ourselves unstuck is not easily done, but possible. And so if you're watching this, my guess is you're working on things. You're trying to figure this out. You're maybe trying to help somebody else figure it out, but there are ways for us to pivot. And I'm hoping that this information is somewhat helpful. I'm going to be talking about fear fatigue live on Monday morning. I don't know the date. Oh, May 1st. So if you happen to be hearing this and you want to come join me May 1st of 2023 at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time, join me live on Instagram. I'd love to see you there, and we'll talk more about fear fatigue. I'll probably repeat some of what I just said, but I'll also be there to answer questions if people have some questions about that. And if you somehow got this after May 1st, 2023, then I'll leave the live up so you can come check that out on Instagram. I love to connect with people on Instagram. I'm mostly Instagram and YouTube, and then my work with people. That's where I spend my time. So I hope that this has been helpful, and please feel free to leave comments, and I will see you next time. Happy healing.